Hey everybody, this is Stan Wanglund. It's February 2nd, 2022, and the big snowstorm in the Northeast is supposed to start tonight. So, man oh man, like it makes any difference. It's winter. What can I tell you? This is episode number 10 of Just Thinking 2022 with yours truly, Stan Wanglund. So, thank you for joining me. And if you've been enjoying the channel, as we take our initial 25 to 50 shows and see what people are interested in hearing about and do our analytics and all that kind of good stuff on the way to moving on to other platforms. If you're enjoying the show, hit the subscribe button, hit a like button, send a comment or anything else like that. Because Just Thinking, the way that it's set up, what I'm liking doing is talking about everything and anything, in a really down-home manner. We do the show as I did my other podcasts, although this is on YouTube. I don't like to waste a lot of time doing a lot of editing and, all that kind of stuff that goes into it. I like the product to be raw and real, kind of like we're sitting in my office where I'm in, my little man cave in my office here, You can't see all my guitars and toys and whatever. And I've got another one downstairs, another man cave downstairs, It's kind of an old guy thing. But anyway, all kinds of stuff that's out there to say, hey, should we talk about this? Should we talk about Tom Brady? Should we talk about, Supreme Court people? Or how about sentencing for people who were at the January 6th insurrection? There's a lot of other good stuff that, hits the news that is trending and people are talking about. But Bitcoins and just all kinds of crazy stuff. But the thing that's really important that's in the news right now, and it's been on my mind. I was just on the phone with my grandson. God bless him, he's in the military. He's a tanker of all things. And he just got back from Poland a few months ago on NATO exercises. And it was also around the Ukraine and that area. And 2 days ago, he just got COVID. And just about everybody in the military gets COVID now, and they get put on 5 days bed rest or whatever. And he said, no, it's not quite as simple as people think. He says, I felt like I was drowning for 2 days. I said, really? I thought this was supposed to be so very mild. But, he's feeling much better now. But he's actually in the rapid response deployment group, not from Fort Bragg, but out in Fort Hood. And, they got him ready to go on a moment's notice. So I wouldn't think he's in that first group of people going on over there, but he could be. And we were talking about some things, and I thought it would be a good show for today. See, I took a long way around the barn, as I always do. And I'm going to call today's show, episode number 10, Putin the Extortionist. Because, to be honest with you, I think that's all that this is about. And why would you say that? Well, you have to look at a couple of factors, and people are pretty ignorant in our world with history in general. And when you go all the way back to NATO and the Soviet Union, now, Russia, but the, USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Ukraine was part of that. And, there was a hot Cold War going on. So to speak, and there was a time that there was almost an equality between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in many ways in terms of, what could I say, military might. That just isn't the case anymore. And people forget that about our country, whether it was George Bush or with Joe Biden or with Donald Trump or any president you can think of. This isn't Jimmy Carter in Iran. And even then, the United States military, even though it was kind of a state of disarray for a while, after the Vietnam Wars and things like that, American military is like through the roof, baby. It's not like when I was in the military in the late 60s and 70s. That, whether you're a millennial or you have a grandparent who's, like me, a baby boomer. So, United States... we spend every year, including this year, our military budget is more than the next, I think, 6 or 7 countries combined, and that includes China and Russia and North Korea and a whole bunch of other places. So it's United States military power is awesome, and nobody in the 21st century really wants to engage unless they're foolish, as we've seen in Afghanistan and other places. You don't want to be engaged in any long-term occupations and ground forces and things like that. Probably the smartest thing that we ever did in the modern era was General Schwarzkopf and George Bush the First with Operation Desert Storm, where we went in with Kuwait and did what we had to do with this huge coalition, kicked ass, and got out. And it lasted for quite a while. Then we got bogged down in George Bush Jr.'s thing after 9/11. But going around all the mulberry bush with all these kind of things, it's really important to understand that in terms of what's happening today on the political scene. I believe so. I don't think it's confusing at all. And I think what you're seeing here and what we're seeing is just the title of the show, Putin the Extortionist. And it's a common tactic. It's like the little martial arts necklaces that you see with the yin and yang. In every crisis, there's an opportunity. And crises that are happening now in the world, or there's economic crises, there's global warming kind of crises, climate change in certain countries, there's supply chain crises, there's COVID crises in countries, and there's also a crisis of countries which have been democracies having their standards and institutions and everything else change rapidly due to social media and bullshit, internally, which has weakened us, and also cyber kinds of attacks. And the Soviet Union, not this. See, I'm dating myself. Russia has been a chief, proponent of that. Why? Vladimir Putin is the president of Russia. President for the next 20 years after the last election. I mean, that's a nice run, whatever it is. Like the guy in China, Ping. The same kind of thing with him. These, president for life, stuff like that. These guys want to stay in power. They're autocratic. They rule with an iron fist, an iron hand, whether you see it or not, particularly in Russia. And Putin is the former head of the KGB. This guy's no dope when it comes to that, with being an extortionist, understanding, what he can try to get away with, what he wants. In order for him to stay in power, he has to have a lot going for him where people really want him in that position. And if the truth be known, people, as they think, is Russia a big, mighty power? No, they're not. As a matter of fact, Putin is what he's been doing lately is rebuilding the Soviet military as best he can, given the finances they have, to reestablish that perception and influence so that he can get some things back for Russia and prevent some things from happening. I thought the Russian economy was much larger than it is. For example, the same thing. And the Russian economy, and I'm not misquoting, is smaller than the state of Texas. Listen to that one again. Smaller than the state of Texas and the United States. It's not massive. They're not a economic power. And although, Russia has tons of nuclear weapons, other countries do too. And they're not a mega superpower or anything else like that. The United States is still the dominant, they're the single superpower that there is right now. Now, are we going to be dropping atomic bombs because of, the Ukraine or something like that? Absolutely not. Are we going to be engaged in a land war with them? Absolutely not. There might be some wacko things that would happen. That would be my interpretation of things. The United States will use just what it's threatening to use and what it has on the drawing board is massive economic sanctions. Now, why does Putin need to extort this from us? Well, I think for a couple of reasons. Number one, to reestablish the fact Putin has some of his supporters in Russia, my understanding. You can check that out yourself, depending upon the sources that you see. He has people that, I'm sure want, like Make America Great. We have people, there's probably Russians who say, come on, we've lost a lot of prestige in the world. Things might have been better in some ways, when we were a superpower and everything else like that. And maybe they feel like they've been getting their ass kicked for a few decades. And, NATO is an extremely, extremely, extremely powerful alliance. And what people don't realize is NATO has been singly the greatest alliance in the history in world history. It's a shining success, regardless of who paid their bill, who didn't. And when it wants to be, it's extremely, extremely powerful. And it's done exactly what it's been meant to do since I guess the late 40s when it was formed, or early 50s. You know, it has kept. It's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it has kept, you know, all the members safe and sound who've been part of it, and it holds quite a bit of might, you know, militarily to be sure. And if the people coalesce together, they have a huge economic power. You know, now whether they've always used that wisely or wanted to do that, they haven't. And these countries that were former members of the Soviet Union, with you know, like the Ukraine being one of it, yeah, they don't mind getting aligned with democratic partners and being aligned with NATO. NATO is not Russia, to be sure, and they can have their own shenanigans. And as far as Putin is concerned, why would he want to extort that? Hey, this is the guy who keeps poisoning and killing journalists and people who run against him for office. And I forget the guy's name, the famous guy who wants to run against him or wanted to run against him for president of Russia. His chief critic, he came back to Russia and he's in jail and he was on the hunger strike. And I should know his name doing this thing, but I'm not. So he's got plenty of people in Russia who would like to see Putin go bye-bye. Putin is incredibly wealthy. Putin is engaged with all the oligarchs and kind of the Russian mafia, as it were, over there. He's an autocrat. He's a bad, as President Trump said, he's a bad hombre, man. He's not a good guy. You know, his thing on nationalism and everything else like that, and the fatherland or the motherland for Russia isn't built on patriotism. It's built on Putin having interests all over the world. I believe he's one of the richest people in the world. He's got money sunken away everywhere. Now you can check that out yourself. Now, why would he pull this bullshit now? I think because he's in trouble. The economy's in trouble over there. He's getting older. There are people younger people in Russia, they don't want this crap anymore with him. And, you know, eventually people are going to say, you know, you're not bringing back the good old days, and they weren't so good to begin with. Where are we going here? You know, and all this stuff where you're riding around bare-chested and wrestling people, and you've got a martial arts, you know, dobuck on and all that stuff. That ain't putting food on my table or giving me all the stuff that I want, because that's the nature of the world that we live in today. So I think Putin sees an opportunity. He doesn't want to have one more place on his border with the Ukraine taken over with the NATO stuff. And what does he say? He sees countries like our country have an irrational presidency. That's my opinion with President Trump. Clearly, American traditions that were on the ropes with this character, impeachment, things that I'm 71. I've never seen anything like this in my life. It's unheard of. You would have never thought that 5 or 6 years ago you could ever see a political climate as bad as it is today. And then you have people who just have alternate realities, so out and out lies, get away with things, you know, crazy stuff. And then you've got COVID, you've got all the, you know, the economic things, the supply chain things we've all been talking about in the beginning of the thing. It gets countries like ours rocking and reeling because we have a divided country at this point in time. We have people who are not thinking clearly. As a whole, we have politicians who are just that. They're politicians, they're not patriots. In the vast majority of these people, and they're not thinking of you and I, they're thinking of their own best interest and their own political best interest. Not in every case, but in most cases, in my opinion. So you've got a very weakened, or you've got lots of cracks in the system. For a person who's a KGB expert, which Putin is, he's as good as they get with that stuff. That's the kind of stuff, these crises, which give him opportunities. And that's what intelligence officers do. That's what the CIA does. If we're promoting our own national security interests or anything else like that, that's what individuals do who are mob bosses, or bunco artists, or criminals, or just aggressive salespeople. Whatever you want to think of, when you have your own friggin' interests at heart, and you're very motivated to do different things. Putin wants to stay in power, and his economy is not going very well, as I mentioned. Lots of things have not been going very well, and there's lots of people who want to take his place. So this is a golden opportunity for him in this crazy period of COVID, supply chain weakness in America, divisiveness amongst people, to try and pull some shit and mass people at the border. There's a lot of optics there, a lot of stuff that looks good. Like here he is riding bare chested again, doing martial arts. He's taking on NATO and everything else. Where is it going to go? I think it's like Khrushchev. He used to be the premier of the Soviet Union in the Cuban Missile Crisis. They tried the same thing with John F. Kennedy because he was the youngest American president. And they started putting missiles in Cuba, and then all of a sudden it was almost World War III. And it was right down to us boarding one of the ships, and it was like the Russian ships pulled back. And people said, I think the crisis is over. It's just like having two people ready to fight, and then the first one blinks. And the Russians blink first. I think Putin right now is looking to play games to keep it up, but he doesn't have to commit to anything. He's got all these people on the border and everything else like that, and he wants to see if he can get something out of this deal. He wants to see what he can extort, because that's what people like him do. That's what they take in every crisis. They look for opportunities, and he can play around with this for a while. If America holds tough the way that it's holding, and it looks like there's bipartisan support for doing the right things, and it looks like there's a lot of people in NATO, they don't want this character getting a foothold, whether it be England or France or Germany or any other of those countries. They don't want this guy. They've already had a divided Germany with East and West Germany and all kinds of other things. Nobody wants that crap again, So I think they're going to figure it out, and it's going to go back and forth and back. But I think President Biden, I think the United States, I think both parties have come together on this one a little bit, regardless of the smoke screens you might see one way or the other. They realize what's in it for them. I'm talking about our own politicians and all that kind of good stuff. And I think they might come up with a pretty good a plan with this guy. And I think Omicron, as fast as this has peaked, I think it's going to all of a sudden just go down. That's why you're seeing North Korea firing off a missile. That's why you're seeing China, having flybys on Taiwan and everything else like that. Why? It goes back to one of the earlier shows in this 10, just in the 10 series, saying, about monsters from the id, man. When you've divided, President Lincoln said that in the Civil War. A house divided against itself cannot stand. So when we have divisiveness, when you think that people who try to overthrow the government or, raid the congressional house that our politicians, good, bad, or indifferent, are residing in, or trying to steal elections, or you're trying to, do illegal things, you're being divisive. We're being dysfunctional, and that to these countries shows that we are weak. We're weak in terms of our reality testing. We're weak in terms of our decision making. We're weak in terms of our morality and where our appropriate values should be. That's their perception. And I share that in many ways. Our personal weaknesses that we're displaying right now invite situations like this. They invite despots like the North Koreans, or bunco artists and criminals and gangsters like Putin. And when I use those terms, they're not just different world leaders. I mean, we all have, world leaders have to do unpleasant things, to be sure. But these guys kill journalists, they kill the opposition, they jail them, they send them to Siberia. They do a lot of bad stuff. Not that we haven't done that also, but you have to put it into a realistic frame of reference. You say what you want to say. I'm doing the equivalent of a podcast on video here, or video YouTube site and everything, I could say what I want to say. I mean, somebody on YouTube may not like it. I'm not calling death threats on people or doing anything, but I can be very, very honest. I'm not worried about getting arrested or getting killed or anything else like that. And these other countries, it's serious stuff, man. You can't do that. Away you go, as Jackie Gleason, used to say. People won't even know who he is, but a famous comedian. Okay, away you go, and you don't come back. So extortion is the name of the game, and that's my spin on that. And if we pull our act together and look like we're not divisive on things, that this can be a galvanizing thing and a good thing. And I think this guy will back off when the optics are right for it. And am I worried about the fact, are we going to send 200,000 troops over there? Is there going to be a land war like World War II? If that happens, I'll be damned, because I couldn't believe that in a million years. Could a nuclear war start with this? I don't know. I guess that could happen at any time, but I would seriously doubt it. I don't think that Putin is that crazy, And I certainly don't think anybody from Red China is, did I actually say Red China? China is that nutty. No, they know in the present environment how far they can push things. And then they try and take a little bit more if there's a crisis with their opposition. And yeah, we can't even get people here to put on masks or take off masks or do different things or acknowledge what's real in terms of real economic problems or real medical problems, or real, public health problems, or, proper policing, let's defund them, or let's do this. Or no, they see a lot of silliness. So when all that silliness is viewed by other cultures, that, again, just to be a little repetitive, they said, let's go in and grab these guys. Let's see what we can shake out of them. I don't know. Maybe that's, reductionist thinking, oversimplification. I don't think so. I'm a kid who grew up in Brooklyn, and, when you're on the streets, and if you look like you were weak and you weren't prepared to do what you need to do or be a regular guy, somebody might take your milk money. They take your lunch money. They slap you around a little bit. See what they could get away with, right? It's called testing limits in psychology. Every teacher knows that, who has a behavior problem in school. Every professor knows that, who has students who are attention-seeking or argumentative, just to be defiant in the classroom. How do you set limits with people in appropriate ways? And this is no different than any one of those. So that's it for Just Think in 2022. Why doesn't President Biden have me on his board of senior advisors? Look how simple I make everything. Probably because I'm wrong. No, I don't think I'm wrong on this one. I may not be perfectly correct, but I think I have a pretty good read on this. And I think you do too. See if it doesn't make common sense to you. Sometimes common sense is really what it is. It's not all this big Orwellian, draconian plan. So, I hope you enjoyed the show. And I hope my grandson, who's in the military, is safe and sound and doesn't get in the middle of a tank battle with Putin's posse there. And I just found out he has COVID, so I hope he gets better from that. So JL, we love you. Thanks for your service. And if you've listened to this show, I love you guys too. And thank you for your service and listening. Have a nice one. And I'll catch you next time on Just Thinking 2022.